We now like to start the presentations by the panelists. Panelist speech 1, highest life expectancies. How long will Japan and France keep the lead? That is the title of the presentation to be given by senior researcher of INED, Dr. France Mellet. Dr. Mellet, please, the floor is yours.
Hello, good afternoon, everybody. And thank you very much for inviting me to present some of our research results in front of you. So my question today is, highest life expectancies. How long will Japan, and I put also France, but you will see that finally the most important question probably is Japan. How long these countries will keep the lead? So just to explain a little the frame in which I am asking this question, you may know, or this is some results which was very largely disseminated in the last years from a paper which was written in the beginning of the 2000s by two very well-known researchers, Jim Oppen and Jim Vopel, which was called Broken Limits to Life Expectancy. It was published in Science. And their idea was to look in the past and during the 19th century and 20th century, to which country had been the leader in life expectancy. And then they draw a line which was joining all the points of these different countries. And this is the graph you have on the top of this slide. They join, and so in the history, the countries which were the leaders, of course, changed. So at the beginning, it was, for instance, Norway, and then there were New Zealand, and then Australia or Sweden, etc., and at the end, Japan. But if they draw a line, they found that it was a straight line. And so their conclusion was that finally, maybe countries could change, but what they call the best practice, so the record life expectancy in the world, was always evolving in the same way and in a straight manner. And they said there is no reason to imagine that this could change, and life expectancy will go on increasing rapidly on this line. A few years later, at INED, with one of my colleagues, Jacques Vallin, we decided to have a more precise look at that and took the same idea as Open and Vopel, but decided to extend the databases, so to start before, because we knew that life expectancy had not always increased, but at one moment it was low and stable. And also because we thought that it was dubious to imagine that it could go on at the same pace all the time. And doing that, we obtained another line, which is here at the bottom. And we published this result in Population and Development Review in 2009, and it was called the segmented trend line of highest life expectancies. So we showed that it was not a totally straight line, but from time to time this line was broken. And the period of time where this line was broken were corresponding to change or to progress in health or in general development. And the first break was corresponding to the gender immunization, so the first victory which was made against smallpox, and that the second break was at the little before the end of the 19th century and was corresponding to the Pasteur time and the Pasteur Revolution. And the third break at the beginning of the 70s, end of the 60s, was corresponding to what we call the cardiovascular revolution. So when, after the big progress that had been obtained against infectious disease and infant mortality, the relay was taken by the victory, not the victory, but at least the control on circulatory disease, and of course at older and older ages. And it's at that time that really Japan took the lead. So even if we contest, and so the fact that the line was broken changed a little the perspective, because it means that at some time this can change, the pace can change according to the context, the medical, but also the economic or the social context. And so it was not so sure that life expectancy would go on increasing and increasing, record life expectancy in the world. But this concept of record life expectancy remains rather interesting, and it's in this frame that I would like to discuss the future, maybe. But discussing the future, it means looking at what already happened or is happening during this recent period. So if we go on with the idea of open envelope, we can think that at one point, as I showed you, one country is a leader and then another one takes the first position. So if we could imagine that maybe at one point Japan will slow down, and in fact it's the case, it has been slowing down a little in the most recent years, could we think that some other country will take the lead? So we have to look around at is there any country which could do that? And if it is the case, will it be also able to sustain the same pace for long, so to go on this straight line or more or less straight line? So what could be the candidates to catch up Japan? So we had a look at several different sorts of candidates. The first group was the second best. So since Japan has taken the lead in the 70s, there was a country, which country was just behind, more or less, and would one of these countries be able to take the lead? Then we could also look at some called former leaders, so historical leaders. I spoke about countries like Nordic European countries, for instance, which were doing very well in the 19th century. What are they doing right now? And then finally, are there totally new emergent countries which are going to take the lead, as Japan did a few decades ago? So the second best. So here are the second best since 1980. So you can see, so maybe I will first speak about Hong Kong, because you can see on this graph that Hong Kong has been the second best since 1995 now, and even from time to time it's even above Japan. But Hong Kong is a very specific case, because in our idea we are looking at countries as a whole, and Hong Kong now is no more independent, but even when there was this specific status of Hong Kong, it's a city. It's only a big city. So we can imagine that it's a rather selected population, and probably it's not very fair to compare Hong Kong to a whole country like Japan or other countries like France here or Spain. So if you forget about Hong Kong, there were three second best in the past year, which were Switzerland, France, and in the most recent years, Spain. Just one thing I forgot to tell you from the beginning is that all these lines were made from female life expectancy, because as you know, female life expectancy is much higher than male life expectancy. So during this speech, I am only speaking about female trends. So here you have these three countries, Switzerland, France, and Spain. So let's have a look at the recent trends for these three countries compared to Japanese trends. And as you can see on this graph, all these countries are progressing very regularly in terms of life expectancy, but they are not really reducing the gap with Japan. So it's probably not on this side that we can find the new leader, the new or at least, and we will see that a little later, it's not for now. Then another idea was to look at former leaders. And there it's even worse. So we chose these three former leaders, Norway, Sweden, Netherlands, so Nordic European countries. And you can see that the divergence with Japan is very, very important, and that they are very, very far from catching up, and it's not on this side that we will find some candidate to take the lead. But then newcomers, and here this is much more interesting. So these newcomers that we could identify are all coming from ASEAN countries. So you have Singapore, but again Singapore is a little particular, but you have also Taiwan, and more important, Korea. I mean, South Korea, of course. And you can see that the trends in life expectancy of South Korea, so this is life expectancy at birth, is really impressive. So right now, it has not caught up Japan, but if the pace of progress goes on at the same rate, in the next years, you will see that it could be the next leader. Just to little more investigate this point, we imagine so how long it would take for this country. So, so just making some very simple projection, which is a simple extrapolation of the past 15 years trend. So let's imagine that in all these countries, life expectancy will go on progressing at the same pace as it was in the last 15 years, and how much it will take to reach, in fact, sorry for this, forget the French here, but to reach a 2016 Japanese level. So to reach a 2016 Japanese level, it will only occur, you see, in 2037 for Sweden, so very far, in 2024 for France, but in 2020 for South Korea. So it means that in less than 2 years now, or 2 years about, South Korea will have reached the levels that Japan had in 2016. But then the next exercise is to see how to reach, I don't know, why did it decrease like that? I don't know, my screen has become small. Oh, thank you. That's all. Okay. And then so this was the first thing. And the second one, no. Yes, the second question was, sorry, how long candidates should wait to catch up Japan? So to have exactly the same level as Japan in the same time. And then again, you see, for instance, for Sweden, it's totally a desperate case. If we imagine that the rate will be the same, they will never catch up with Japan. For Norway or Netherlands, it will be also very late. For a lot of countries, it will take much, much time. If everybody goes on progressing exactly at the same pace, But for South Korea, it's 2022, so it's much closer, and we could imagine that in 2022, South Korea will be the new leader, if they go on with the same rhythm of progress, of course. And then if we look a little more precisely, why is South Korea doing so well in the recent past? Of course, as in all countries, the first step was to deal with infant mortality and to manage with infant mortality. But in the most recent years, what was very impressive in Korea was the trends in life expectancy at old age. And here you have the trends in life expectancy at age 60, comparing France, Japan, Spain, and Korea. And here you can see that for this age, Korea has reached the same level as France and Spain and is really now progressing very rapidly. Another way to look at the same thing is to look now in terms of causes of death. So here you have a comparison between the case of Japan, Korea, and France between 2000 and 2015 or 14 for France, for the increase in life expectancy at age 60. So just let me explain you how to read this graph. So this is the decomposition of the progress in life expectancy according to age and causes of death. And you can see here that, so you have on the horizontal axis the different age from 60 until 95 plus, and on the vertical axis, the contribution of different causes of death. And if you compare, first if you look at Japan and France, you see that the trends are quite comparable. There are progress, which were around 2 years in the period, and this progress are mainly due to progress in all causes of death, but mainly, of course, in circulatory disease. So it means there was a decrease of the mortality from circulatory disease, and more on the side of cerebrovascular disease for Japan, and more on the side of heart disease for France, but it's quite comparable. For Korea, the progress are much more important. They are especially important for circulatory disease, but if you look at the top level, you have also this green part, which is related to senility. And this senility was very important because it was playing, it has disappeared progressively because the statistics is more and more precise in Korea. And so to compare better, we decided to redistribute this death due to senility to have only well-defined causes of death. And this is the panel you can see below. And here you can see really this impressive progress in Korea for all causes of death and for older and older ages, and especially for these purple areas, which corresponds to what's called here other circulatory disease, but mainly stroke and cerebrovascular disease. So progress really very important. I am now at the end of my speech, so I will go very rapidly through these last graphs, which show you the trends in causes of death since the 1980s. And what is, maybe if you have only one thing to remember, that for all causes you have a very sharp decrease in South Korea, and really a convergence between South Korea and the two other countries taken here as an example, France and Japan. So just to conclude, we saw that Japan slowed down since a little since 2009, but France did too, and other countries following did too. So it could be possible that some countries catch up with Japan, but for Hong Kong, as I told you, it's already done, but let's forget about it. But very likely, South Korea could be the next leader, while other ones, like historical leaders or second best, won't be. But even if South Korea goes on with this rhythm, and so we are really not sure that it will go on with the same pace of progress that's the one which was observed since the 1970s. And so the idea that maybe the line could be, maybe South Korea will be the leader, but also the pace could change, and the line could be broken once again. But unless there is some progress in the health of the elderly, which could accelerate again the progress at this very older and older ages. Okay, and that's it. Thank you for your attention. And sorry for taking a little too much time.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mele.